Morning, honey.
Good morning, Lieutenant. This is the man that shot me. He fancies me like mad. Perhaps it is the apron.
What if I told you that one of Britain's best-loved wartime sitcoms may never have made it in the cancel culture world we live in today? In the 1980s, Allo Allo was the crown jewel of British sitcoms, a hilarious parody set in war-torn France, filled with quirky characters and cheeky jokes. But hidden in its run was a scene so infamous, so controversial, that it's still whispered about today as the reason the show could never continue. What really happened behind that fateful moment? Grip your berets tight, because we're going full throttle into the remarkably sleazy world of Allo Allo, the series that had the temerity to turn World War II's Hitler into a comedy figure, disregarded every possible rule, and somehow managed to get away with it all, until they didn't. Comedy Anarchy was born in 1982, when two British comedy scriptwriters came up with the cheeky notion of producing a sitcom that satirizes Nazi-occupied France. Sounds like a career-killing maneuver, doesn't it? Well, Jeremy Lloyd and David Croft, the creators of Are You Being Served?, were soon going to show that some of the most hazardous concepts can give us some of the best television. Allo Allo burst onto BBC screens with a premise so outlandish it couldn't possibly have succeeded, situated in the imagined French village of Neuvien in World War II, where the program revolved around René Artois, a chicken cafe owner sandwiched between resistance fighters, German officers, and his own roving eye for the waitresses. But here's the thing. This wasn't your average wartime drama. This was comedy gold-clad in controversy, and it was on its way to becoming one of British television's most-watched shows ever. The producers of the show took every holy cow of World War II television and made them the subject of comedy. German officers were incompetent buffoons who loved sausages and pilfering paintings. French resistance members were inept clowns, and even British pilots were upper-class twits who cared more about tea than escape. What made Allo Allo so perilously clever was its reliance on stereotypes, where each and every character was overacted into a caricature guaranteed to make sensitivity readers today break into cold sweats. Germans used to say VOT instead of what the French resistance used to butcher English expressions, and Officer Crabtree's mangled French became legendary in such lines as good moaning for good morning. The show's secret was that it mocked everybody in turn. No nation, no cohort was exempt from its satiric sword. In a time when political correctness was no more than a twinkle in someone's eye, Allo Allo was able to get away with boundary-pushing unthinkable today. And push boundaries they did, from René's string of affairs to double entendres that flew right over kids' heads, but had the grown-ups in hysterics, making the show a masterclass in cheeky British comedy. Phrases such as, "You stupid woman," and "I was pissing by the door when I heard two shats" were catchphrases that summed up a generation, and the casting was absolute genius. Gordon Kaye as René was so well cast that his cowardice and charm were equally perfect for the role. Carmen Silvera as his wife Edith sang her tone-deaf songs of such dedication that they became comedically iconic. And Richard Gibson's performance as the sinister yet ridiculous Her Flick was unforgettable. Most incendiary, perhaps, was the show's timing. For here was a sitcom alluding to one of the darkest moments in history, and yet, miraculously, it did so without belittling its actual atrocities, all the while satirizing war, reaching an all-too-rare delicate balance that very few comedies have ever come close to. Breaking ground in the 80s and 90s, Allo Allo didn't only push boundaries, it blew them to pieces with a cheeky smirk and a "listen very carefully, I shall say this only once." The sexual innuendos were omnipresent, plain as day like René's master paintings, and the show was a master at crafting double entendres that would make the most mature audience member blush. René's on-again, off-again affairs with waitresses weren't subplot fodder. They were the show's snarky charm. Consider the classic sausage moments. The show employed food imagery with such risque abandon that it's a wonder they managed to make it through the BBC censors. With references to René having his sausage stuck, in small spaces, sending parents frantically reaching for the remote control as kids remained oblivious of the adult joke hurtling overhead. The series' handling of the Nazi regime was arguably its most brazen element. While the memories of World War II were still close to mind, Allo Allo had the courage to portray the Third Reich as completely inept. Colonel von Strom and Captain Gearing were both portrayed as art-loathing fools more concerned with pillage than victory, and her flick, reportedly the Gestapo's most feared officer, was portrayed as a leather-clad parody with an unhealthy fixation on Renee, rife with homoerotic undertones that would never make it in today's television environment where the same would be considered insensitive and problematic. The members of the resistance weren't immune either. Michelle Du Bois, with her horrible disguise and complicated schemes, embodied every spy thriller cliché spun on its head. Her infamous "listen very carefully" catchphrase made iconic despite plans so ridiculous that they were on the verge of being absurd. One of the most shocking things about the show was its matter-of-fact discussion of wartime brutality, with characters frequently talking about death, torture, and executions as easily as if they were ordering a sandwich, in a way that would be unimaginable today, and rendering the atrocities of war nearly satirical and tiptoeing along. That took amazing skill to achieve. The costume team should be singled out for special praise for their role in fomenting the controversy. From the austere leather clothing of her flick to the topless uniforms of the waitresses, each wardrobe selection appeared calculated to carry on just a bit further. Words were another front on which Allo Allo waged its battle of wit and humor. Accents and misspellings were used by the show in creating humor that is culturally insensitive today. Officer Crabtree's garbled French, the VOT and VIL of the German officers, and the over-the-top French accents all added to a comedic work that audiences today might find objectionable. The series also engaged in loose and fast play with historical facts. Though filmed under Nazi occupation, the characters tended to act more like those in a bedroom farce than a battlefield. Such a light-hearted attitude toward one of history's darkest times was both the show's finest aspect and most contentious element. The gossip and the truth here's where it gets really interesting, and we must let fact fight fiction. There's been a long-standing rumor circulating that Allo Allo was unexpectedly canceled because of a very divisive scene that one line too far. Is there any truth to this rumor, though? The internet is abuzz with theories about what this fabled final scene would have contained. Some fans believe it involved some sort of off-color joke about concentration camps. Others have posited that it was a scene which parodied actual historical figures too bluntly. There are even rumors of a missing episode which was found to be too objectionable to show. But here is the tea. Allo Allo was not cut short by controversy in any way whatsoever. The show really ran its course, ending in 1992 after a respectable 9 series and 84 episodes. The last show, A Winkle in Time, was broadcast on 14th of December 1992 and gave the series a decent ending. So where did all those rumors of cancellation originate? Some of the confusion could be due to the fact that Richard Gibson, the actor who played the legendary Herr Flick, didn't feature in the last series. His part was taken over by David Janssen, and this caused some fans to wonder about backstage intrigue. The reality is more down-to-earth, but no less intriguing. Lloyd and Croft, the creators of the show, believe they had said all they had to say and were ready to let their characters go. By 1992, the show had completed a decade, and the writers thought it was time to send off Renee and crew with dignity. But that does not mean there weren't controversies galore during the show's tenure. There were some episodes that pushed the envelope so hard that they shocked even in the wider-open 1980s. The show's approach to serious war themes using a comedic format was always treading water. One especially discussed aspect was the show's handling of collaboration during occupation. Renee's character also flipped back and forth, assisted Germans, aided the resistance, and took care of himself first, a morally dubious characterization that some reviewers found upsetting. The series was also criticized for its flippant handling of wartime horrors. Characters talked about bombings, fatalities, and deportations with a lack of gravity that some fans considered upsetting. The comedy format enabled the show to touch on such serious subjects, but it also meant not taking them as seriously as they ought to have been. Nazi art theft, a real and heart-wrenching part of Nazi occupation, was treated comically by the show in episodes involving German officers pilfering paintings, historically based though it was. It was occasionally thought to be trivializing cultural devastation. The rumor mill has been in high gear regarding whether certain episodes have quietly been pulled out of circulation. Some fans have observed that some reruns bypass particular episodes, and speculation concerning censorship and content warnings arises. Why it could never be made today, let's be brutally honest here. If someone pitched Allo Allo to a TV network these days, they'd have themselves ushered out of the building quicker than Renee from the Gestapo. The television world today is a different animal from the 1980s and the 90s. The audiences of today are more tolerant to cultural stereotyping, historical sensitivity, and diversity in media representation. A program that had its whole premise based on overblown national stereotypes would immediately be skewered. Consider it. All of the characters in Allo Allo were walking cliches. The hapless Germans are fixated on being efficient and sausages. The inept French resistance who couldn't get an escape plan right. The upper-crust British airmen who mangled a posh accent to comical extremes. In the cultural climate of today, with greater sensitivity towards other cultures, such depictions would be offensive and possibly damaging. The episode's lighthearted handling of sexual harassment would be a huge stumbling block. Renee's ongoing affairs and inappropriateness with his romantic waitresses was something that was handled with humor, but today's audiences would justifiably view it as workplace harassment. The boss-employee power relations would be interpreted through an entirely different set of eyes. Social media would have feasted on Allo Allo. Twitter would be filled with think pieces regarding the show's egregious aspects. Hashtag campaigns calling for it to be pulled from streaming sites. Cultural critics would produce lengthy essays on how the show reenacts reprehensible stereotypes and jokes about historical trauma. The LGBTQ+ community would probably complain about characters, such as her Flick, whose homosexuality was symbolized by leather attire and obsessive tendencies, a characterization based on expired and egregious stereotypes. Contemporary television makes an effort towards realistic